Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Don Harmon. I'm the Illinois Senate President Pro Tem, Democrat from Oak Park. I am very pleased to be joined by a robust group of fellow legislators, Democrats and Republicans alike. I'm going to introduce my colleagues in the Senate as well. We are all here today to unveil the Combating Illegal Gun Trafficking Act. This new amendment that has just been filed late this morning and will be read into the Senate record when we go into session, includes three key ingredients. It includes the Federal Firearm Dealer License Certification Act. We heard critics of the Gun Dealer Licensing Act that the General Assembly passed about too much bureaucracy and too much red tape. So we've come back with a dramatically simplified structure without compromising results. Federal firearm licensees will need to be certified by the state, and they will have to follow the best practices relating to straw purchasers, to securing their inventories from theft, making sure they maintain safe stores, and have trained employees working for them. Dealers will also face consequences if they engage in behavior that's likely to put guns in the hands of criminals. We treat all federally licensed firearm licensees the same. There are no special deals for small dealers or for large dealers. But we also recognize in this bill that gun dealers are not the only source of illegal guns, and so we're adding two additional ingredients that I think are critical. The first is the Gun Trafficking Information Act. This will allow for an honest study of data relating to crime guns and straw purchaser patterns. And finally, the third ingredient is a restriction on private sales. One of the complaints we heard about the Gun Dealer Licensing Act was when a gun is sold by a gun dealer, it's sold to an individual. If the gun is traced back to the dealer, the police visit that first purchaser who says, I don't know, I sold the gun to a guy. There's a requirement that those private sellers maintain records, but there, to this point, have been no consequences of failing to maintain those records. We're imposing those consequences for the first time, and we hope that this will lead to better law enforcement and more responsibility for folks who have purchased a gun from a gun dealer and then turn around and sell it to a criminal. Again, as I've said, I'm very pleased to be joined by colleagues from the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, who are involved in this. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Senator Chris Nybo in a minute, but we also have Senator John Curran, Senator Tom Rooney, and the other senators. Senator Nybo. Do you want
to introduce the representatives?
I'll let you go in then.
Good afternoon, everybody, and I appreciate Senator Harmon giving me the opportunity to make some remarks. There's no doubt, and it's been empirically shown, that a significant percentage of firearms recovered at crime scenes in Chicago can trace their origin to gun dealer shops located here in Illinois. And as we talk about a comprehensive approach to making our communities safer in dealing with gun violence, there's no doubt in my mind that having safer practices and a better way of preventing gun trafficking originating from dealers here in Illinois needs to be a significant piece of that comprehensive approach. I had concerns with the bill as originally introduced. It was difficult for businesses to comply with it. It was difficult for the state to administer it, and I thought that the bill could be, I thought the issues could be better approached and the bill could be better written. I do appreciate Senator Harmon and the advocates being able to and willing to engage in that conversation. And this is a bill that I can lend my support to. And I think it's important for our colleagues to understand how significantly different this bill is than what we had before. There's less red tape to get a certificate. There are fewer requirements for holding a license, so it's going to be easier for businesses to actually maintain their license. The state has a more restricted ability to impose new rules or change existing ones than what's set forth in the statute, so the statute is clear in that regard. We've removed bureaucratic reasons for penalizing a business, and if we're going to penalize a business or we're going to consider the suspension or revocation of a license, we're going to do so because of its impact, either unsafe practices or their willingness or their demonstrated ability of engaging in criminal practices or practices that allow gun trafficking or straw purchasers to take place. And finally, we've given enforcement of these new powers to state police instead of a mostly civil regulatory agency. It's a law enforcement measure at heart, and we believe that those powers are best given to the hands of the state police. So what we've done is we've taken a bill, in my opinion, that was difficult for businesses and difficult for the state, and that really had a penalizing and onerous effect on law-abiding businesses. And we've streamlined the red tape, the administrative processes, and we've got a stronger focus on our two key elements, which I think is the heart of what this bill should be. One, the adoption of safe practices by anybody who engages in firearms transactions. And two, the ability to investigate, penalize, and stop bad actors who have shown a willingness to engage in straw purchases and gun trafficking. With these changes, this is a bill that I'm proud to support, and I'm optimistic as we head into the last few weeks here that we'll have that opportunity. Thank you.
State your name again, please.
Chris Nybo.
I'd also like to introduce Senator Christina Castro, who has joined us and has lived up to my promise of having Democrats and Republicans alike. Representative Willis.
Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon. I am very proud to be the House sponsor of this bill. This is a bill that has gone through some wonderful changes, and I think, as Senator Nybo said, it has made it a better and a stronger bill. This is a bill that will still cover the integrity of what we had originally in our gun dealer licensing, but we've gone and looked at how to make it better, how to work bipartisanly, and how to actually get to the root of our problems, having illegal guns or guns owned by the wrong people, and having dealerships that are not maybe doing their best business practices. We took the best from the original bill, added in some great other things that I think both the senators have told you in quite detail, so we'll leave it at that. But I do want to introduce my House colleagues that are here, and we do have bipartisan House colleagues here. So I have Jonathan Carroll, Representative David Olson, Representative Marty Moylan, Representative John Connor. I just go JC, so that's where we're going. And Representative Michelle Mussman, and then myself, and I think I got all of our reps here. So we were very happy when we passed the original bill to have very strong bipartisan support. I think this new bill will even have better and more bipartisan support, and we look forward to moving it in the next couple of weeks. And with that, Senator Harmon and I will be happy to take any questions.
What makes you think the governor is going to be okay with any of this?
We feel that since we've worked very strongly bipartisanly, that the governor will accept the bill.
So certification replaces the former licensing?
Yes, it is now called
Is there a
certification.
fee associated with that, and what does it take to get a certification from the state?
We've really eliminated the red tape. If you have a federal firearm license to sell guns in Illinois, you submit that to the state police along with an affidavit that this is in fact your license and it's still valid, and the state police issues you a certification. We are not trying to enact barriers to people to get the certification. We want gun dealers to be certified. It creates the requirement that they will follow best practices and that there would be consequences. But we're not enacting artificial barriers, and to your point, I think that was a big piece of the governor's stated objections to the gun dealer licensing bill, that we would have red tape.
What's that cost? What is best practices, though? I mean, is there the camera requirement still
It's
in there?
video surveillance of stores, maintaining a workforce that is educated and has their FOID card, training in practices to avoid selling to straw purchasers. The same sorts of pieces that were involved in Senate Bill 1657 carry forward here.
Can you talk about the certification costs?
One second. Previously, sheriffs had to sign off. Does
That is no longer a requirement.
Okay. And it's operated by police instead of IDF?
It's the Illinois State Police that would be charged. There's a question about the fees. It's a bifurcated system. If you are a gun dealer with a retail location, a traditional gun store, it would be no more than $1,500 for a 3-year license. Your federal firearm license period is 3 years. You certify for the same amount of time. If you're a dealer who does not have a retail location, it would be much lower than that. It'd be $300 for the 3 years. No more than $300.
And may I add, and I think this is where this is a significant significant part of understanding. In the application process, there's no more written examination. There's no more requirement that you have a certain level of experience. There's no more opportunity for a personal interview in certain circumstances. There is no requirement for the letter from the sheriff. And there's no longer a requirement for a pre-certification interview. So all of those are just examples of how this process has become much more streamlined and much easier for law-abiding businesses to comply with.
Senator Harmon, does this apply to the big box stores? There was criticism last time of your last bill that it hit the mom and pop shops, but did not hit the big box stores.
It treats all federal firearm licensees the same. kitchen table dealers and big box stores, everyone in between.
Can you talk about the restrictions on the private sales? What does that entail?
Sure. This is a really important part of the bill, and I want to emphasize what I said in the front end. A real source of frustration for us dealing with this, and where the gun dealers made a valid point. A gun is recovered from a crime. It's traced back to the first gun dealer who sold the bill. Their records indicate they sold it to John Smith. The police go to visit John Smith, and Mr. Smith says, I sold the gun, I lost the gun, whatever the story is. Mr. Smith today has a legal requirement to maintain a record of that sale, but there's no consequence if he hasn't. So that's where the trail goes cold for police investigating the chain of custody of the gun. So what we're doing here now is imposing real consequences if you fail to maintain those records. Hopefully this will lead to downstream tracing of the gun to eventually the criminal.
What are the consequences?
It's a misdemeanor for the first offense, a class 4 felony for the second, but it puts people on notice that they need to maintain these records.
Can you talk about if somebody's a private seller on the kitchen table, like you said, but they also may have a retail outlet? Do they have to get multiple certifications?
You mixed up 3 different things there all at once. So a private seller is someone who doesn't have a federal firearm license. I own one gun, I want to sell it to Senator Nybo, and we make that transaction. I'm supposed to keep records. The licensees, the federal firearm licensees, there's a variety of classes. If they maintain multiple licensees at the same location, a license to sell and a license to do gunsmithing, we would treat that as one license for the purpose of certification. If you maintain multiple locations, multiple retail stores, we'd ask that each be certified. But I don't think there's anyone who is a kitchen table dealer and has a gun store. That's not the model. If they've got the gun store, they're a retail seller with a retail location.
On the gunsmithing aspect, are there contractors that would be impacted by this that don't sell but may, finish off the lower receivers of an AR-15, for instance?
You need to have a license to sell the guns in order to be subject to this act. That's what we're aiming for, is the people who are engaged in the business of selling firearms.
So it wouldn't impact the gunsmiths, so to speak, if they're not reselling?
If they're only gunsmiths, no, I don't believe it would. If they are selling guns and gunsmithing, then yes, that license to sell guns would trigger a certification requirement under the bill.
Can this pass this year, A, and B, the governor made it clear yesterday, part of his whole package look at this is reinstatement of the death penalty in some way. Can you, if he were to like AV this bill and say put the death penalty in for the situations he said yesterday, would that kill it, or what would that do to it?
The governor's amendatory veto of the 72-hour waiting period was not an amendatory veto. It's a veto. It is blatantly unconstitutional. There is no way the General Assembly could take that up if we wanted to take that up. It's a veto. Let's call it what it is. I hope that, given that we have been very responsive to the concerns of the governor and of other critics of gun dealer licensing, with this new amendment, we will not have that reception from the governor's office.
And what happens if he does? Would you be opposed to that?
Absolutely, and that too would be unconstitutional, and I would move to override that veto.
Does this have anything to do with redefining, like, assault weapons, for instance, or injecting language that would define a certain weapon as assault weapons in any way?
I don't know. I'm going to get to your question in a minute. I just want to respond to what my friend Senator Harmon just said. I remain open to everything that the governor suggested yesterday, and I think it's great that he's adding himself to the conversation. He has asked for a comprehensive approach to addressing these issues. I don't think there's anything inconsistent with what we are proposing today with the conversation that he's asked us to have, which is to engage in a comprehensive approach. As I said in my remarks, I would hope that dealing with gun dealers and the problem of gun trafficking and straw purchasers would be part of that conversation and ultimately part of a comprehensive approach that we take.
To your question, no, we do not get into the niceties of describing or defining assault weapons or any other kind of weapon.
Can you talk about your plans for moving this bill forward? Is it going to be in committee soon?
I hope that it will be in the Judiciary Committee today, and I'd like to move it over to the House as quickly as we can. We have 15 days left in the spring session, and I think there is both a path and a political will to send this to the governor before the end of the session. Representative?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to introduce two more people that walked in. We have Senator Raoul that came through and Representative Williams also. And one of the things that I do want to stress is this is what we consider a clean bill, that we want to keep it that way. We don't want to muddy it with any of the other things that came out yesterday in the mandatory veto. Our goal is to work on this, look at gun trafficking. We've already passed legislation that the governor felt was not appropriate. We have now continued to work bipartisanly, have a bill that we want to work through and get it passed the way it is. And we hope that there are no mandatory vetoes, nothing to muddy the water. We want this to pass because we feel it's a good piece of bipartisan legislation. Thank you.
Is there anything else in this that maybe caps how many firearms can be sold to one individual, or so it doesn't?
No, it does
can't
not
sell
do
more than
any
5
of.
or anything like that?
No, because what we've got is everybody that has an FFL would get a gun certification. That is part of what it goes. It does have the different levels if you're a table seller as opposed to if you are a brick and mortar seller. It does have a sliding scale on where that cost would be for you.
I'd like to be really clear, though. This does absolutely nothing to infringe on anyone's Second Amendment rights. This is an effort to regulate, as the Second Amendment mentions, regulate the trafficking and sale of guns and gun dealers. Nothing more than that. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
You have bill number?
337. Senate Bill 337.